Hello Year 11. Today's revision video is going to focus on propaganda. Now we know propaganda was a very important tool to Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. It's one of the main reasons why he was made the Chancellor of Germany on the 30th of January 1933. So first of all, what do we mean by the word propaganda? Two definitions. Number one, spreading information and ideas. Number two, to make somebody believe your version of the story, to make somebody think that your version of the story is the correct one. Those are the two simple definitions of propaganda. Propaganda was so important to Adolf Hitler that he employed a minister of propaganda, somebody that could oversee it, manage it, and take control over propaganda for Germany. That man was Joseph Goebbels. So what were the ways that Joseph Goebbels and the Nazis used propaganda in Nazi Germany? Now, the first thing you need to know is that Joseph Goebbels, he needed to control and limit other ideas and beliefs. So he used censorship. So what this meant was the government tightly controlled or censored what German people saw, what they heard, and what they read as well. So anything could be banned, films, books, news articles, or jokes, if it was seen as harmful or damaging to the Nazi Party. So censorship was a big part of propaganda, trying to control and limit what people read, saw, and heard in Nazi Germany. Censorship means removing something, removing information. Now, the second way that they used propaganda was to simply spread information and ideas. So what ideas and information would the Nazis and Joseph Goebbels be spreading? Three very clear ideas. Number one, to make Germany great again. It would be the job of Hitler and the Nazis to make Germany a great country again. After the disaster of 1923, the Ruhr invasion, hyperinflation, the disaster of 1929 with the Wall Street crash, Germany needed something to hold on to, a hope, a promise. And that was their first main message, to make Germany great again. The second message was the hatred of the Treaty of Versailles. There were 4 terms of the Treaty of Versailles: land, army, money, and blame. And Hitler and the Nazis wanted to make sure that they convinced other people that they would hate the Treaty of Versailles as much as they did. And the third message was an anti-Jewish message. So how did Hitler and Goebbels, how did they spread that information and those 3 ideas? What methods did they use? So the first method that they used was posters. Now the most famous poster that you want to write about as an example in your exam is Arbeit and Brot, which means work and bread. The famous slogan, work and bread, work and jobs, what every German wanted to hear in the early 1930s, following the Great Depression of the Wall Street crash, the mass levels of hunger and poverty, promising people the food that they wanted so much to eat and the jobs they wanted to get was very, very important. And it was one of the key messages that was put out onto the posters. You can see the poster behind here on the board, most famous propaganda poster. Another method that they used was radios. Radios, Hitler was very passionate and he realised their potential greatly. 70% of German homes had a radio in them. And what Hitler was trying to do with these radios is by every home having a radio, the radio could be playing in the background, reinforcing these ideas constantly. For example, women had to follow the teachings of the 3 Ks, children cooking in church. Whilst they were cooking, they could have the radio on and listening to these Nazi messages constantly, playing with the children. The radio could be on in the background, again reinforcing these ideas of the Nazi Party. Hitler made sure that radios were produced in vast, many amounts of numbers so they could be produced quickly and cheaply so people could easily afford them and they could be put in the home. So we've covered posters and radios. What else was a powerful propaganda method? The rallies that Hitler did. The rallies, most of them took place in Nuremberg, a big city that's in the south of Germany. These rallies, attended by millions of people, would show the power, the strength and the dominance of the Nazi Party. It made it look like a fun, exciting organisation. So you have the mass rallies that took place. You would have choirs there, bands, speeches. It would be fun, new, exciting. Everybody wanted to take part in the rallies. They just seemed so great. And again, it was just this idea of brainwashing, trying to make it seem that the Nazi culture was the only possible good thing to follow in Germany. And of course you've got newspapers. Newspapers were a massive part of Nazi propaganda. They owned a lot of the newspapers, in particular the Nazi Party, so they could control and influence what people were reading, what they were thinking, and what they were interpreting from those newspapers. Any newspapers that printed stories that were against the Nazi Party, for example, who criticised them, would be closed down by Joseph Goebbels, remember the guy who was in charge of propaganda. And of course you've got films. Hitler was friends with lots of business and cinema owners, for example, and they weren't just constantly producing films that were all about Hitler and the Nazis, because people wouldn't pay to go and see that. But for example, 45 minutes before the start of your film screening in the cinema, you would watch a film about the Nazi Party to show how great they were, how they were turning things around for Germany. So the cinemas and their adverts were another way into helping brainwash and influence people into supporting the Nazi Party. Another really famous example of propaganda was the Berlin Olympics. So in 1936, Hitler constructed this massive brand new Olympic stadium to show off the wealth, the power and the dominance of Nazi Germany, how great his leadership was, that it had transformed the sporting world of Germany. And this great Olympic stadium that was built, countries came from all over the world to compete. Germany won the most gold medals, and it was, Germany was the forefront stage of the world. Look how great this country is. And people again were excited to be participating in such a wonderful event. So you've got the Olympics as well. And even things like books, theatres, music, influence, controlled. They had to make sure, Goebbels had to ensure that any book that had any anti-Nazi message, again, it would be censored, it would be removed. Theatres would, performances would, support the Nazi Party, glamorise them, make it seem like a fun, exciting place to be. So that, in a nutshell, Year 11 is propaganda. So hopefully you will be able to explain for your exam. I would say try and revise about 2 or 3 examples. Have 2 or 3 examples really clearly, get them written down on a flashcard so you can rattle off straight in the exam. 70% of homes had a radio, the famous poster Arbeit im Brot. Get those examples written down on your flashcards. Thanks.